In today's Net Check, we'll have a look at a very select group, Chinese business people in Africa. Trade between China and nations within Africa has increased dramatically over the past few decades. Official data shows that from the year 2009 to 2011, Sino-African trade volume has risen from over $90 billion to more than $166 billion. Also, China's investment in Africa has increased by 30 times over the last decade. China has also been Africa's #1 trading partner for 3 consecutive years. However, there are currently no figures to confirm exactly how many Chinese business professionals are currently conducting business in African countries. Figures provided by Chinese independent scholars show that currently over 1 million Chinese citizens are working in Africa. So, what's the situation for Chinese business people in Africa, and what kind of opportunities and challenges do they face? Well, to get an idea from the opinions in the online community, let's now join our researcher Esther Dung in the newsroom. First off, Esther, can you give us some background information on the general situation of Chinese businesses in Africa?
Oh, yeah, sure. As you've said, there's no official data about how many Chinese people are doing business in Africa, but nobody denies the fact that they are definitely a large group. First, I'd like to share this post on Tiexue.net, which refers to Angola, one of the fastest growing countries in Africa in recent years. See, tens of thousands of Chinese people have started their business in Angola since 2002, when the country stopped its 27-year-long civil war. It's said that there are more than 240,000 Chinese businessmen in Angola, and that means there is a Chinese for every 100 Angolans. And plenty of net users who mainly have the experience of visiting African countries offer lots of details about those Chinese people's business in Africa. Like Liu Zhirong, a Chinese scholar who spent years in Africa, told the Times Weekly magazine that Africa is seen as the world's last gold ore, and lots of people go there for opportunities and wealth. And the African governments encourage Chinese people to invest in their countries, since that will create job opportunities and contribute taxes to local authorities. And he also adds that the majority of Chinese products in Africa are clothes, small home appliances, and motorbikes. Compared with Western businessmen, Chinese people like to invest in small-scale business like restaurants, pharmacy, and a massage center. Anything that can make profits in a short term. And the China Business News did an in-depth interview with over 180 Chinese businessmen in Africa. And 90% of the interviewees said that they go to Africa mainly for economic reasons. And they are attracted by the huge market demands, cheap labor costs, and low capital threshold. And the newspaper points out that lots of these Chinese businessmen in Africa are from China's coastal cities, mainly Zhejiang and Fujian province. And they have to put up with bad living and working conditions in Africa and have no holiday or any social activities.
Right. Nobody will deny the huge business opportunities in Africa, but besides the low standards of living and working environment mentioned by the last poster, another worry is the security aspect. Here on China Take, we've covered several stories where Chinese people have been beaten or kidnapped by locals. What's being said about this?
Oh, yes, a lot of net users have seen put forward this aspect. China Business News, the newspaper I just mentioned, said that Chinese businessmen don't have a decent social status they deserve in Africa, and their personal security is often at risk. And they dare not go out at night and often get robbed even during daytime. And it also mentions that the language barrier is another obstacle, especially when they are involved in lawsuits. And also a certain number of net users have a bone to pick with the Chinese authorities, like this net user from Fujian. Chinese businessmen are the main contributors to the Sino-African trade, but they are actually a quite disadvantaged group. They are facing all kinds of dangers in Africa, and they get little support from their own government. The Chinese embassies in Africa care more about China's political interests than these businessmen's interests. They have nobody but their fellow countrymen to rely on. And finally, we have Ji Qi, chairman of a famous Chinese hotel chain, who relayed his personal opinions during an interview with the Changjiang magazine. I think only two kinds of people are suitable to do business in Africa. One group is those who are really brave and smart and can bear hardships. And the other group is state-owned companies, which have powerful backgrounds and abundant capitals. I myself like adventures, but when I was in Africa, where I had local officials accompany me, I still felt the general situation there is unsafe.
Finally, Esther, the Chinese government has promised that over the next 3 years, China will provide $20 billion in loans to Africa and emphasize that China and African countries are friends and brothers. But what's the relationship at the individual level? I mean, the relations between Chinese business professionals and African locals.
On this question, lots of posters I've come across point out that the relationship has been worsened in recent years, and they've listed several reasons behind it. First, listen to this take on ibtimes.com.cn. Chinese businessmen were warmly welcomed by locals at first, but gradually more and more African people become unhappy with them. The Africans complain about the low payment, bad working conditions, and low quality products in Chinese factories. And although Chinese investment in Africa does boost the local economy, it's only the African politicians who get the benefits and become extremely rich. The ordinary people are still poor and hungry. And this poster has this to say on Sohu.com. Made in China products are seen everywhere in Africa, and they are cheap, but they are notorious for bad quality. And we also have this net user on grj.com.cn. Chinese people accumulate huge wealth through their hard work in Africa, but their neglect of local cultures and laws have brought lots of trouble to themselves. Some Chinese bosses even have physical conflicts with their African employees. And finally, I'd like to share remarks from Wang Yongcan, a Chinese businessman who went to Africa back to the 90s. Some Chinese businessmen don't respect the local culture and the laws. For example, they have no labor contracts, no insurances, and force the employees to work during holidays and do not give any extra pay for overtime. This has caused endless lawsuits. In recent years, more and more countries and companies have entered the African market, and the competition has become much more tense than before. And it's high time for Chinese businessmen to learn to conduct business inside the legal boundaries.
Thanks, Esther. And that was China Take researcher Esther Deng on Sino-African trade and the benefits and risks for the hard-working business people in Africa.